That's for a past election that was a catastrophe. And it was a very unfair situation. And after 2.5 years or 2 years, they found no collusion, no nothing.
4 investigations.
Oh, many investigations.
You have the FBI, you have House Intel, bipartisan Senate, and then Mueller investigation.
That's right. Many investigations. That's all they did is investigations. And yet we've had one of the most successful administrations in history, certainly in the last 2.5 years, in the first 2.5 years of the administration. So when you look at what's going on and then you see all of this horrible stuff and then you hear about Ukraine, and you've been hearing about it. I heard Clinton was involved. I heard they got somebody who wrote the fake dossier. Was it out of Ukraine? All of the things that happened. And I assume that the Attorney General, I would like the Attorney General to find out what's going on. Because you know what? We're investigating corruption. And I actually heard Greg Jarrett and numerous people the other day say, I have an obligation to do that. That's not a question, can I do it or don't I do it? We have an obligation to investigate corruption. And that's what it was. In my opinion, that's what it was, is corruption. And if Ukraine would know something about the 2016 election, you have to give that information. I hope that they would give the information. And everybody agrees with me 100%. But when I look at experts that are on your show and other experts, they're all saying you have an obligation to do that. So I think, I have a friend who is a very good lawyer. He read that conversation. It's not a letter. It's a conversation taken down and transcribed, a perfect conversation.
And
he actually said to me, did you know this was going to be like a document that's going to be analyzed? I said, no, but you have to understand. I assume there are many people. It's either being taped or they either have stenographers or taped. And I think they don't like to tape world leaders, and I can understand that. So they have stenographers and people that take this down, transcribers. And it was a perfect transcription of a perfect conversation. The other thing is when I'm talking to somebody, world leaders, almost anybody, I assume that State Department, I think Mike Pompeo was on, I think many people were on, there were many people on. Do you think I'm going to say something wrong when I feel that there's 25 or 30 or 2 or 20 or 10 or something? But there are a lot of people on these calls. Some, I think, listen for educational reasons. Some listen because they're members of the State Department. There are many people listening to these calls. And to think they took that call. Now, the big thing I did with that call, Sean, the biggest thing is immediately released it. Because the whistleblower came out and said horrible things about this call. I think they said there were 7 or 8 quid pro quos. It was really a terrible call. All these terrible things about this call. I said that wasn't a bad call at all. Now, what else happened? The president of Ukraine came out and said that was a perfectly fine call. There was no pressure. There was no anything. One of his top people, I guess one of his heads of state, came out and said this was a perfect call. There was no pressure. They didn't even know what we were talking about. To think that they're using that. Now they don't talk about that anymore because that letter was so good. So they don't talk about it anymore, Sean. And the reason they don't talk about it, there's nothing to talk about.
The next thing you say, though, I think makes your point. You say, as you saw yesterday, the whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller, an incompetent performance. But they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important. Here's my question.
And it did. It ended with a very poor performance. And this is after more than 2 years of an investigation.